Welcome to our show. We have two very interesting guests, old friends, old teachers. Oh, I shouldn't say that. No. Former teachers. Over here is, in red, is Verda Sieber. She's taught here many, many years ago. She even went to school in the Centerville school system. Next to me is Polly Albrektson, an old friend and companion teaching long ago. I think, Polly, that we'll kind of start with you. When did you start in the Centerville system?
1939.
And where did you come from?
New Vienna, a town close to Wilmington College.
Is that where you went to school?
Graduated high school and taught there 4 years and then came to Centerville.
All right. Now, when we were talking, you told me you were hired in a kind of an unusual way. Who interviewed you as a future teacher?
Well, when you come to Centerville, you'd have to meet every school board member. And some of them worked in town, so you knew. But if they worked on the farm, you went out the field, and I carried my overshoes with me.
Because you're going to have to go to
I had to go. And then that night, you interviewed all the school board members and the superintendent. And they asked you questions, and they wanted to know if I wanted to come to Centerville and teach. I said, well, it wouldn't make any difference. I had a job. But I had a girlfriend here, and I wanted to come to teach with her. And one of the school board members said, well, we can't keep teachers. All our young men marry them off. I said, are you going to be one? I said, I don't know.
Well, I know in those days you couldn't teach if you were married. What was in the school teacher's contract in those days?
You couldn't get married, you couldn't drink, and you couldn't smoke. You had to be good.
And if they caught you doing those things, you were out. Okay. All right, when you first came here then, you were finally hired. What large sum of money did you make?
Well, at my hometown, I was making $100 a month. When I come to Centerville, I got $120. And my dad was just spreading all over the neighborhood. She got a $20 raise on the month.
Big time, $120. I hope some teachers today are listening to that.
Yep.
When you came to town to live, you didn't have a car. I suppose teachers couldn't afford cars.
No.
Where did you live in town?
George and Lucy Weller in one of those old stone houses on Main Street.
The two-story...
that two-story one there. There were two other teachers there, Mary Lacey and Dorothy Zimmerman. And Lucy would cook for us, and George would look out for us. Said he had to see his girls would behave themselves.
So teachers, so they kept you on the straight and narrow. Yeah. Well, then you could walk to school each day.
We walked. Well, that's the only way you could get there. No one had a car.
Okay, so everything functioned around the village then?
That computes village, because they started a library, and we'd stop in there and get your library books.
All right, it was called Washington Township School at that time, not schools, school. School. One building for all 12 grades.
That's right.
What grade did you teach?
6th grade.
6th grade. You taught everything?
You sure did. You didn't have a gym teacher, you didn't have a music teacher, you didn't have nothing.
You taught everything.
You taught everything, and when you went out for recess, you went out with them. When you went to lunch, you ate lunch with them. I bet those kids got tired of looking at me all day long.
I heard you were a popular teacher. You were strict, but they liked you.
Who are you kidding?
No, I heard this from old people coming back. I thought they're as old as me, and coming back and talking about you. Boy, you didn't misbehave in Polly Fisher's class, but she was fair.
Well, they had to be fair. I would be fair. But if they didn't play fair, I didn't either.
Okay. You talked about the playground, and I've always been interested in the fact that they had a cistern behind the school that they used to collect water for showers and things in the school, because they didn't have a good water supply. Where did the students get a drink then when they were out playing?
There was an old well in the back of the playground, and I'd take my tin cup out with me every recess at noon, and of course we all used the same tin cup. We didn't get sick, though.
That's good. Today they'd never approve of that, would
No,
they?
I take my tin cup along with me.
In the 30s, I know Centerville got some kind of a water system.
Yeah.
They used the old quarry, put in a water filtration plant. Now, you were telling me there were some funny things that happened in the spring with that water.
They'd always talk about it would turn over. Then it was a mess. Tasted terrible and all. But after a few weeks, you got used to it, and it cleared itself up. I never
What color was it?
Light green.
A light green.
Light green. Had all the algae. See, the algae was coming to the top.
So people were drinking algae
What else
water.
you going to do?
They called that spring blossom.
Yeah. But we didn't even get sick. We didn't get sick.
Okay, well,
We
that's,
got along all right.
well, was Verda teaching when you came there?
Yes, she was the first grade teacher. And she was down the first floor, but I was up for the second floor. And of course, our restrooms were down in the basement. So here you go, second floor, first floor, down to the basement, the restrooms.
You know, the restrooms aren't on the basement anymore.
Oh, I can't believe it.
No, they changed all that. They aren't down there anymore. You go into what's now called the Megsig building, and it's quite changed from when you were there. How many were in your class?
When I came there, it must have been, the upper 30s or early 40s. Classes were large.
Was yours the only sixth grade?
It was only sixth grade. She's only first grade.
Oh, at that time there were 12 grades and 12 teachers, or
Well, in the high school there would have been more teachers than that,
but in the grade school,
in the grade school,
There was
just
only
one section for each class.
They didn't even have kindergarten for a while, did there? Was no kindergarten even.
You remarked about the duties that the men teachers had that was a little different than your duty.
Well, in the wartime, they would drive the school buses and pick the children up in the morning. Then they'd have to take them home in the evening. And of course, we'd have teachers' meeting, but the rest of us teachers would sit there and twiddle our thumbs waiting them come back from their bus rides, and then we'd have our teachers' meeting. But that was during the war.
How many buses they have?
I think, what did they have, 3 or 4 or 5?
Oh, I think there were more than that.
Not when I came there.
Not when I came?
Not when I came there. I remember they were all Ford rattling along, but they got them there.
I don't recall how many buses there were.
Because most of the children would walk in, live
well,
in
those that
town.
lived in Centerville.
See, they would walk in, and we'd just get
that's
them out,
right.
out there in the country, you see. And I think it was 3 or 4, maybe got up to 5.
Children walked a lot further in those days without
Well, I
complaint.
walked too.
All right, Verda, you didn't have to drink this strange water the village was having. You lived out on a farm up on Mad River Road, up above AB Road.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about the farm and your family?
Yes. My father bought the land. He had come from Germany, was 16 years old when he came, and then met my mother, and they were married, and then he bought 40 acres on Mad River Road. And most of it was frontage onto Mad River Road. It was not a deep farm. But there were 9 children in our family, and my oldest sister was 22 years older than I, so she was married and gone before I was ever born. But I remember 5 of us living at home at one time, 3 brothers and a sister and myself. And my father grew all the kinds of crops that all farmers grew then, largely tobacco, because that was one of the big
Money.
That's right, money, and then corn, of course, wheat. And he always took our wheat and our corn to Miamisburg, what is the Peerless Mill in now, and that's where it was ground, you see.
Or at the old Peerless Mill. Now, your mother died when you were still young.
Very young. She died the day after I was 12 years old.
And then who took care of you?
My sister and I, we sort of took care of the rest of the family.
So
we did the cleaning and the cooking. And
so the girls kind of assumed some of the responsibility that your mother had had, and your father then had 5 children at home.
5 children at home.
You were in the Centerville, Washington Township system. It was called the Washington Township Schools then. Where did you go to school?
Well, I first went to a one-room schoolhouse on Mad River Road. That building is still there, although it's been made into a residence, and it was called Number 9 School. And I suppose we had as many as, 20-some children in school at one time. And I know I only had about 2 children ever in my class.
You mean that would be in your particular class?
That's right.
Even though there's 20 students in the building?
Sometimes there would be 2, sometimes there would be 3, and sometimes 4 or 5. But, it varied, from year to year as people moved in or left the community.
Well, you brought a picture here that I found very interesting. I'd like the audience to see. This is in what year?
That would have been in 1920 because I was in 2nd grade, and I remember that it had to be in 1920. I started school in 1919, and some of the children in there were younger than I, so they had to be in 1st grade. So I know it was in 1920.
And this is old Schoolhouse 9. And then there's another picture you brought that's just wonderful. Also, this is at the back of Schoolhouse?
That's the back of the schoolhouse. That's where the picnic was held.
And this is called Woodburn School in this picture, so this is very early scene. Are you in this picture?
Yes, I'm down in the front row. My sister is also in the front row.
You're a little girl.
Right, and very little. And I don't even remember whether, I suppose I was going to school at that time. I don't believe there's a date on the back of it. This was a reunion of all the people who had gone there. My mother had gone there to school.
Oh, your mother had also gone there?
Yes, because she too lived on Mad River Road and was born in the house that is still standing. The Fred Smiths that live there now. And when that house was remodeled, they retained the old portion of the house where my mother was born.
Well, I noticed they call it Woodburn School, and you said there was also a Woodburn Church. Where was that church?
The church was next to where the cemetery still remains. There's not much in the cemetery anymore. There's
on Whip Road?
On Whip Road, right.
Okay.
And there's just a couple of tombstones that are left in that area.
I understand something happened to some of those tombstones.
Shall I tell it?
All right, tell it.
Well, this was the story that went all through the neighborhood. A family came and built a new home across from the Woodburn Cemetery. And, years ago, most of the tombstones were just flat slabs. And one by one, those flat tombstones disappeared. And the story went that those tombstones went into that house as in the hallway, flagstone hallway, which would have made a lovely hallway, but I suppose they must have been turned over so you couldn't read any dates and names on them.
Oh, I wonder if they're still there in that house.
I'm sure they are because I don't think anyone ever had them taken out.
I bet you wouldn't take them out.
There's some great pictures. Now, I know you taught in elementary, but these are all pictures from your high school life. And you graduated when?
In 1931.
1931. So this is a picture of a chorus. So what year would this probably be?
This was around 1930. Our music director was Eugene Powell. And Eugene had no formal education as far as being, a music teacher. He had not gone to college to be, but he had wonderful music talent. And came to our school, and we did big things the years that he was there. I think some of them we'll talk about later. Well, this was our chorus.
I recognize a lot of names. I'm looking at the ones on the back, and I see Clark Haynes is in there.
Right, yes. He was always a tenor. You'll find that was the year we won a trophy.
Oh, I see. Someone's holding one
with other schools, and we won. And I don't remember whether it was first place or not, but we won a trophy.
What schools would you compete with?
All those in the county.
Okay.
All of those in the county, in Montgomery County.
All right, and I notice all these pictures you've brought are taken in the old Megsik Gymnasium.
Right.
And I see the bleacher seats behind. Now, this is another picture of interest. This is a picture of what?
The first musical that was ever performed at the Centerville High School.
The first musical.
First musical.
And if people look at the back going up behind, those are the seats, and the students are standing on the gym floor. Today, those seats and that floor are covered with seats from the auditorium now. It is laid right over that. Laid right over that old gym floor.
Now, our performances were always in the town hall.
Oh, in the township hall. Okay. Because that had the stage
That
and
had
the
a stage. See,
lights.
there was no stage there.
We had several of our Christmas programs
yes,
till
right.
after the war. Yeah, that's where we go.
You had a very active high school life. This is my favorite picture because Clark Haynes in it, and you said Clark Haynes wouldn't want you to show this picture, but we're going to show it anyhow. This is a picture of what?
Clark and I were cheerleaders our last year in high school, and I really looked like a boy in there because before school had opened that fall, windblown haircuts were quite popular. Well, I wanted a windblown haircut, so I went. Those days we had no beauticians, we went to barber shops. So the barber gave me a haircut. I said, I want a windblown haircut. Well, he really cut off nearly all I had. And as a result, in those outfits, I looked almost like a boy. But Clark and I were the cheerleaders, and we would go to all the games. We didn't have football then, we just had basketball.
All right, so the cheering was just for basketball.
That's right.
I know.
Can't even remember the cheers that we did.
Well, we've got at Walton House. We do have a book with
you
the
have
cheers,
cheers in
and
there?
we found we had a lot of fun reading them. Now, we once interviewed Mrs. Driscoll, and she told us how Mr. Driscoll, as principal, superintendent, everything with his job, that he organized for the brighter students a Latin club, and this is the old Latin club, and. He was not only superintendent, he was teacher.
He drove a bus, too.
And he drove a bus, too.
Yes, he drove a bus.
Oh, dear.
May I say something about this Latin club?
Yes.
In the old high school, it was like one large room with a folded door, I think, going between the two sections. And we had to have, because Mr. Driscoll had a study hall as well, we had to have our Latin class in front of the whole study hall. Can you imagine going through all of this in Latin in front of all these other people who were supposed to be studying?
Well, I think students must have been a lot more tolerant and better behaved than they are today. Some probably even picked up a little Latin.
Well, they probably did.
Some of your pictures are wonderful. I see other things they had here. This is something I was interested in because I know this is something that still goes on. The National Honor Society is still a very well thought of, and it's a way of pointing out and recognizing students that do good get good grades. And this says 1931, but you said this is not in front of Centerville School?
No, that's in front of what is called now the Dwight Barnes building, I believe. It was the Fairmont High School at that time, the only high school. Yeah. And we had to gather there to have our pictures taken.
You're right here in a white hat.
We always wore hats when we went any place those days.
Well, I noticed every girl in there had a hat on. That's very interesting. Quite a change.
You were not dressed properly if you didn't have a hat on.
So these students in that picture are some from all over. I notice it says Jefferson, Germantown, Madison, Farmersville, Brookville, Fairmont.
From all the schools over Montgomery County.
Oh, it's a Montgomery County.
Right.
All right, we've gotten you graduated. Now let's get on to some of your teaching. You came to be a teacher in what year?
1934.
All right, what grade did you teach?
I taught second grade. I had wanted first grade, but there was no opening. You see, there was only one classroom for each grade level. And Mildred Long was the teacher. And as Polly had mentioned before, if a woman got married, a woman teacher got married, you had to quit. So Mildred was marrying George Bunnell, who was also a teacher in this school. He taught 8th grade, and Mildred had to quit. So I was fortunate enough that I got her position. Well, I taught that for 2 years because the first grade teacher was still single yet. But in 2 years' time, she met someone, and she was going to get married. So I asked for her place, and I taught first grade then from then on.
You liked first grade?
I liked first grade very much. Shall I tell you something my father said to me?
What did your father say?
When I told him that I had a chance to go to first grade, he said, why do you go down? You should go up.
Now, I see that's the way the old thinking was.
Yeah, that was
the
right.
higher grades you taught, them must be the better your position.
Well, for many years, high school teachers made more than the elementary teachers.
They did make more.
Oh, they did.
Oh, yes.
They did.
Now, you rode school buses to school.
Yes.
Can you tell us something about the school buses on Mad River Road?
My brother was a senior the year we went into the centralized school. And so he was one of the first bus drivers. And these were old Ford buses. They always looked like they were top heavy. There seemed to be so much more extending over the rear tires than there was over the four sets, or the four tires that were there. And when we would get to Mad River Road, our house was up at the top of the highest hill as you come up Mad River Road from AB. And the old Ford bus with all those children in it could not get up the hill. So we would have to get out and walk up the hill, and he would drive the bus, and then whoever had to ride on got on the bus and went on then. But that bus just could not make
No matter
that hill.
what the weather, you did
That's
that.
right. We got out and walked.
Got out.
Well, Polly, you mentioned the buses were having trouble somewhere else on a hill.
Oh, they're where Bethany Village is now. We'd get stuck there. Of course, they didn't have any facilities to take care of the ice or the snow or anything. So here would be some of the teachers, some of the school buses, even the principal. We'd be sitting down the hill where Bethany is, and classes would go on because
Couldn't get up
we
the-
couldn't get up
couldn't get up the hill.
because they had nothing to take care of the road. See, and she's tell about the time you slid off of that hill.
Well, I was going home from school one evening, and it was icy, and I guess I applied my brakes because I was fearful going down the hill,
Oh, it was
and I
steep.
slid into the ditch.
Now, people should realize it's all two-lane roads at this
That's
time.
right.
was right,
That's
two
right.
lanes.
It was
Two-lane
two
roads.
lanes.
It
right,
doesn't look like it does today.
The road was paved, but not as wide as it is now, and you didn't have the shoulders that you have now on either side.
What was your beginning salary?
Oh, my beginning salary was so so great. I thought it was great, I guess. $800 for my first year.
For the whole year?
For the whole year. I remember getting my check. We got checks every 2 weeks, and I had a check for $22 every 2 weeks. And then the second year, I just praised the school board so highly because they brought my salary up with all the other teachers, which was, I think, around $1,500 or something like that.
Very good. Now, was there ever any trouble during the Depression years when the schools, the school board couldn't pay you or didn't have enough money?
I don't think we ever went without money, although I do remember this, that Washington Township could not afford to have a superintendent for a while. And so, now this was when I was in high school, this was not when I was teaching, when I was in high school, that Centerville and Miamisburg combined, and we were under one superintendent. Harris V. Baer was from Miamisburg, and so he was the superintendent for both schools. I should have told that when I was telling things about high school days.
That's very, I never knew that.
I never knew that.
I saw his name listed as one of our superintendents, but he really was between the two towns.
He was superintendent for both school systems. And I can remember when I was ready, or had graduated from Miami, and that was in the Depression years, you see, and the schools were not taking on anyone, any more faculty than they could actually pay for. So another girl who had graduated from Centerville High School with me had gone to Miami also. Her father was on the school board. So there was one vacancy in the Miamisburg schools. Guess who got the job?
I don't know who.
The other person whose father was on the school board.
Yeah.
A little patronizing.
Oh, well, that's the way it worked, though.
I know
That's the way it did.
It still does.
It still does.
Now,
Sure.
both of you ladies were there during the 40s, during the war, and here is a community, Washington Township in the village of Centerville. We're filling up with people. After the war, it's filling up. You are so crowded. Tell me, how crowded are you, Polly?
Well, you want to know about one of my years? I had 55 students in what was the old science room, and they had the fire alarm bell outside my door. And he come and he rang that thing. And
Who?
The fire marshal.
Oh.
And I started them out, and they kept coming. He looked in and says, "My God, it's not empty yet." So I said, yes, come going. He said, how many you got? I said, 55. He said, gee whiz, where'd you put them? I said, well, a lot of them I didn't have room for desks, so I had chairs along the wall. We had those wide wooden sills and windsills, and I said these students would sit there on the windowsill and do their classwork. We had 55. We had them. You did too.
Well, I didn't have that many.
Yeah,
The
I
last year I
55.
taught at Centerville, I had 47. And had I stayed in first grade, and had I stayed on the next year, I would have had 60.
That's what we
But
had.
that's when I left then, and then they went to 2 first grades. And
Right,
I
they
think,
really needed to.
oh, they really did. But
Yeah.
Oh, that fit-
I don't
will
think
forget
people
that.
realize. Well, during the war, you couldn't build.
We
so
couldn't build. And when Monday morning come, I used to dread Monday morning because I know that hall would be filled with children and mommies. And I would have to bring them in the
Bring
room.
more of them.
We had to take care of them.
the year after I left, the second grades went to the Methodist Church, I believe, for class,
Yeah,
and had their
they did.
classrooms there.
They had to. Well, when they started the addition, they finally started adding on when they were able to build. Wasn't it a little chilly? You were telling me what a time.
Yes, we had canvas, and all the cold wind would come in where we were.
Just canvas hanging over the end of the building.
Just hanging over the building, because they couldn't always get their supplies as they needed. See, it was right there in the war. But we had all those children, we had to take them.
So you're teaching school while the construction's going on.
Yeah, and then they would leave us out maybe early one day, then they'd have to put the dynamite out there to blow the stones so they get another wall up.
That's right. Centerville has stone under the
Stone, see?
ground.
And they'd send us home, and then there would go the dynamite. Then next morning you'd wonder, will the canvas still be there?
I'm surprised Meg Sick is still standing.
I am too, after what we've been through there.
So that really was a trying time. I know when I started teaching, they were getting a classroom a month, they
oh,
said.
yes, easily.
And that was in the 1960s. And you were there in the teaching during that very rapid growth of 40s and 50s, too.
Our school day was also very long.
It was much
Very
longer
long.
than it is now.
We started at 8 in the morning, had an hour for lunch, and went until 4 in the afternoon.
4 o'clock.
That is a long day.
That's a long day.
And we'd have 15-minute recess in the morning,
That's right.
15-minute in the afternoon. And of course, you didn't have a gym teacher, so you went out and you organized your own games, see? That's the reason I thought those poor kids put up with me all day.
You taught a lot of games.
Well, I enjoyed it. That's where you get to really know your children. Out on the playground.
How big was the playground then? You didn't have a stadium then, did you?
Oh, no.
There was no stadium. Was it just farm back there?
Well, it was a large field. The boys played baseball. We had a baseball
Way there
diamonds,
in the
but way in the
back.
back.
That's
But
close. They
no,
were
no
drinking
stadium.
well.
That's
They couldn't
right.
get drinks.
But that was the land that the school owned.
They had it.
So they did have it, for enlarging, and then later on. That was after I left.
Yeah. That we had.
And that cistern was right under your playground out there?
Yeah, they had a top. And that's where
Right.
the kids would roller skate.
That's right.
At recess and noons.
Oh, they could bring their skates.
Yeah, they'd roller skate out there.
Now they bring skateboards.
Right.
Oh, different.
But that's the way it was down there.
Well, times have changed a little bit, thank heavens. But in a way, it seems like I'm talking to 2 teachers who really had a lot of get up and go. You had a lot of initiative to survive in those days, and you didn't complain.
We didn't have teacher's aides or anything. You just did it
In all
all.
my years of teaching, I never had a teacher's
I
aide.
never had teachers. I wanted to grade my own papers anyway.
Okay. Well, I'm very happy to have you 2 here today. It's been a lot of fun to
This
reminisce.
has been fun.
Thank you so much for coming.
Very
And I
welcome.
thank you for coming also and tuning us in.
This has been fun, Janet.